I'll introduce myself. My name is Jeremy Legaspi. I'm a speech language pathologist, and I work on the PRC side of PRC Sotelo. So Sherry and I work closely together during the year on fun different projects and supporting great teams like NAU in their endeavors. I've been an SLP for 16 plus years, and I also teach the AAC class for NAU's AT certificate program, which is technically called AT communication impairment or something weird like that.
DIS 525.
DIS 525, but it's not AAC. It's like communication, assistive technology, communication impairment or something like that.
I'm putting a link in the chat for anyone who wants to know more about that AT certificate program.
And I was on earlier. I don't know if anyone else introduced themselves as far as participants. You don't have to get on and say who you are, but if you just say your role, like teacher, SLP, OT, just so I have an idea of who we're talking to tonight. And hold on, PowerPoint's still thinking. I'll answer Marlene's question from Cherry's presentation. We have this AEC Literacy Club planner that has lots of books that are older, skew older, things like Wrinkle in Time, things like that. So that is also free. That's on the language lab, and I'll put a link in that. But that's totally not what my presentation is about, but I thought I'd answer that why I saw it. Okay, PowerPoint decided to work, so let me. No one wanted to say who they were. Let's see here. Thank you, guys. Maybe it's just delayed. And you guys let me know when you see that, but on the wrong screen. Can everyone see the screen?
It shows. Yes.
Okay, great. So I am going to talk about Lampwords for Life for visual impairments today, and just from a quick show of hands in the chat or hands up with emojis. Is anyone working with visually impaired clients at the moment, students or with AAC? Okay. Thanks, Christine. Sherry is. Just a quick, these learning outcomes were listed in the description, so I won't go over them just for sake of time, but we'll be learning about how to use Lampwords for Life, strategies, about the hand-underhand technique. And if you're not familiar with what LAMP is a method. So it is language acquisition through motor planning. And it's a therapeutic approach designed by a husband and wife team, SLP and OT, that gives individuals who are nonverbal or have limited verbal abilities a method of spontaneously and independently expressing themselves through the use of a device, and most specifically on unique and consistent motor plans. And that's the vocabulary. On the strategy side, it has these 5 key elements. So these 5 elements are put into place using the methodology, readiness to learn, joint engagement, consistent and unique motor plans, auditory signals, and natural consequences. So when all those things come together, we have just kind of an explosion of language paired with a vocabulary that is set up to capitalize on this method. And this comes from the Center for AAC and Autism. Some links there. There is also a Facebook LAMP VI specific to, and I'll put that in the chat later, specific to working with kids with visual impairments that are using the LAMP VI vocabulary. Lots of resources. If you've never been to a LAMP training, I highly encourage you. NAU has hosted them in the past, and hopefully, fingers crossed, in the future. Yes, Nikki and Megan.
Yes, we would love to do that again in the future.
Perfect. These are the components of LAMP. So all of these put together form those neurons growing together and firing and forging those language connections. So the two at the bottom are the ones that are needed first: readiness to learn and joint engagement, paired with unique motor plans from the vocabulary system with the auditory signals, resulting in a natural consequence. So that's the method in a nutshell. And what we've done with the Words for Life visual impairment vocabulary is that we've added a sixth part to this language connection, and that is using a tactile key guide. So for someone that is visually impaired, and specifically when I'm talking about visually impaired tonight, it's typically the low vision to totally blind population. There are kids that may be using this that have CVI, but that's kind of a different animal and a giant gray area that we don't have enough time to go into tonight to discuss. So I'm happy to chat with you offline more about that in detail if you like as well. So I'm assuming you guys know the vocabulary, having signed up for this session, which is a quick review of what's been changed from the typical Words for Life vocabulary. So there's simplified motor patterns. So what we did is we've taken a kind of 2-hit sequence that would have moved the client's hand across the screen to make those words that are going to be the most useful core words. Those are going to be double hits. And then there was some reorganizing of some keys, like the go back and the to provide some extra room on the corners, because the corners are most findable tactily. So those are going to be populated with those preferred. I'll show you when we demo the vocabulary here in a second. But the magic behind all of this is the tactile key guide. I've worked with many clients that have been on systems that have visual impairments that didn't have that tactile component. And just by introducing that has really changed the game for a lot of people that didn't have it before, and then for those just starting out. So what that looks like is this key guide that goes over the vocabulary, the touchscreen vocabulary on the accent devices. There are 8 raised locations with tactile markers around the sides. All these tactile markers make every word in the system findable. They each have a tactile location to be able to find a word that you're looking for. So you're using the tactile guide to create a motor plan. And initially, you're going to take these 8 locations in the center and create some anchor words off of those that are going to be the most meaningful to that specific client. Each client's device is going to be slightly different in their kind of starting words. So you'll swap those preferred in there, and then that is where they'll live that is where they'll live forever for that particular client. So what's been modified also is the introduction of a small set of some high contrast icons. And that's where I just want to kind of differentiate between the idea for these were for low vision and kids that have some vision. You could totally use this with CVI population, but they could totally do okay without the need for high contrast. Again, that's a whole nother course in vision and CVI versus low vision kind of stuff. But we do have some clients using this with CVI and they're doing it well. But there is just kind of a fun debate going on if it's beneficial for kids with CVI or not. I just say go motor plans the entire time, and there's not a difference in using your vision to find the icons, but that's again another another in-depth training. I'm going to briefly show. I'm going to switch screens here and show Empower. So this is what this would be on the accent device, again with the tactile key guide over it. You're going to take those initial 8 words and create those as an anchor. So you're building language off of those anchors. So let's say want is going to be one of those words that's going to fall in one of those spots. They'll be able to want to create that motor plan for want, easily findable. And then the next screen is going to have color coding that you would find in the typical words for life. However, just subtly there. It's really not intended for that user to see that. This is really for those that are supporting, doing some modeling, knowing the difference between where a verb is versus an adjective. So if they have some residual vision, great. They could use that to find some of the word and language differences, verb versus adjective versus noun. But it's really there just to maintain an architecture, which would kind of disappear if everything was totally black. Again, they are using this. Most kids, we'll see some videos here in a little bit, are totally blind. So the having high contrast or the colors there don't make a difference. It's really the tactile, the structure of the vocabulary, and every word being 2 hits, 3 hits at the most away. That makes it very powerful for them. So as they go through, you will use those 8 locations and build that as an anchor word. So they know where want is, now they know where play is, and look is, and slow is. So you'll be able to anchor those words and then grow language from there. Switch back to. Sorry, I have 2 screens. I still don't have enough room. I'm trying to find the chat too, because I'm not seeing it. Great. So once you've established that this is the way to go for this client, and if it is a question, PRC Sotelo has a wonderful trial device program. So you get a device for 4 weeks. And even if you need it for less time, a week or 2, we're able to get your device, drop it off, provide some training on how to use the device. And if they need it longer, and with this population, they typically do, we could start with those 4 weeks and go from there. Now with this population, prompting is going to be crucial. They see with their hands and their tactile system. So making sure that you are consistent with the type of prompting that you're providing is going to be crucial. and making sure all team members are on board on that and are using the same method. So this is just a small sample of types of prompting systems that you'll find in AAC literature. The one that we're focusing on and the one that you'll be seeing, that you see most often in typical prompt hierarchies, is the least to most prompting system. And what that looks like is here on the left. So this is a typical prompting hierarchy. You'll see this probably posted in classrooms and therapy rooms and whatnot. You'll see most at the bottom being hands-on, and then slowly reducing that hands-on until it's just verbal to nonverbal to just pausing. And that's the typical way you want to kind of get in and get out and establish where those words are. And that is for someone that has, that has their vision. However, I've seen this up on walls at schools for the blind, and to some extent, yeah, it's great. It's putting that, it's talking about prompting. However, almost all of these rely on someone having vision. So what we've done is on the right side of the screen is created a prompting hierarchy for someone that is visually impaired. So you could see the bottom three here are going to be crucial initially, and you will live here for a great while with this population. But the intent is to get in and get out, and not make that client so prompt dependent. To some extent, it's not inevitable, but it happens very often in this population. So the intent is to be careful and be thoughtful about how you are modeling the language, because they don't have that vision. So when you're thinking of someone that you're modeling for them, typically aided language input, you are just showing them where that is, and that is not happening in this population. So that has to happen in a different way. And these are just some examples. The one that you'll see most often is the hand underhand, and these are just kind of slight derivatives of that, the sandwich and taking the ride. Sandwich is not really a technical term. It's just something that we came up with just to put a picture, a name with a picture, really. Same thing with taking a ride. But the one that you'll see most often in a lot of the literature is going to be hand under hand. And if you're not familiar with that, it differs in hand over hand in the extent that it's used to demonstrate an activity of the child as you're jointly exploring items by touch. So we'll talk about another kind of mutual tactile experience that's more in line with kind of what a joint engagement activity would be with someone on the spectrum. But the hand under hand, as you introduce it, it needs to be gradual. That person with low vision or blindness needs to feel secure. They need to make sure that they're being part of that experience. And you want to kind of let them feel comfortable to the extent that let them hop on and hop off at their own pace. So they're learning that experience of what this device is and what the point of it is. All the while you're narrating what is going on with a verbal description. And the next couple of slides will kind of talk about what these guided principles are. So for the sake of time, I'm just going to read the kind of the bolded ones. Is you want to slow down. This is going to be a journey for a lot of these clients with visual impairment, and you want to be flexible in how you're approaching it, and talking about what the real purpose of the activity is. Have some clear intention and communication on what you're doing with the device and how much assistance is needed. I've seen some clients jump right in and be able to do it right away. Others, they are at that hand in their hand the entire time, and that is just kind of the world that they live in. A lot of it is making sure that that communication partner is there, they feel safe, and then they're able to communicate. I would explain what the activity is going to be. Talk about what it is, be it a shaving cream or sensory activity, what the expectation is going to be. There's going to be a lot of mishits. There's going to be a lot of imperfections. So make sure you honor that and share that knowledge with what works well for that kid and document that. So that could travel with that specific client. So everyone is doing the same thing. This is called mutual tactile attention and tactile modeling. And this is essentially what I alluded to earlier as I like to just basically call that a joint attention, that joint engagement for someone that has no vision. So they're aware that that communication partner is there. They've established that they can learn through their movements. They're interested, so they could benefit from hand under hand. And this is a good distinction when kind of teaching this to other professionals, the difference between hand under hand and hand overhand. So when acquiring this skill for the first time, that hand under hand is warranted for that controlled demonstration. Actually for the control demonstration, the hand overhand, to actually physically put them where they're supposed to be, and then the hand underhand for modeling. And that is that distinction. When it's hand underhand, they're able to hop on and go to that with you, learn what tactile markers are being touched, and the intent that they'll be able to fade that and they'll be doing it themselves. And this next point is very important, is that hands equals your eyes if you're blind or have low vision. So hand under hand builds that spatial awareness. It connects the child with the people and things around them. And checking in allows that child to put more effort into communicating rather than predicting what's going to happen next. I'll put this link in there as well. This is just a great description on hand under hand. But if you're going to be working with someone with visual impairment, this is important, especially with this population. So we're going to see some kids using the method and the vocabulary. So this is Ani. Ani is, this is when she was 5 years old in some of these videos. She's 8 right now, but I wanted to show this as the initial kind of starting point because I meet a lot of kids like Ani and they're kind of stuck. And I'll show you kind of where she's stuck. She's lost her vision shortly after birth. She was adopted by a mom out of Missouri who is the teacher of the visually impaired. She's essentially nonverbal and uses some approximations when super motivated. Tactile signs were introduced using eight symbols, and we'll see this in a video here. Make sure I shared my sound. There we go. So this is, again, Ani's 5, nonverbal, and you could see here she is using these tactile symbols.
Okay, we're going to turn the puppy off. Ready? All done, puppy. All right, Ani, do you want more puppy or all do you want? More puppy? Here he is. Here's more puppy. Gentle hands.
So lots of kids are starting at this stage. Great introduction to using tactile skills for communication. But this doesn't grow to language, and there's not a system in place for them to start here and then jump to a more robust system, in short of carrying a giant duffel bag around with all of these symbols. She has the board, and she doesn't know what's on it until she goes and feels for it. And things are whisked away and whisked back in, and maybe different each time depending on what word is being targeted. So that goes on, and that's where she kind of was at 8 symbols. There's no auditory output part of this as well. So there's no real clear indication of who's doing the communication, and things get really muddled in the middle. This is her first session. You could see when we talk about some strategies, if we have time, we're using Gorilla Tape, and tactile markers have been highlighted here with some textured paint. So it just kind of makes them really stand out. So this is her first session seeing the device.
Yeah. Well, should we show Mom what we like to do with it? Maybe Miss Erica should try it first. Kim, put your talker in front of you. You're looking for it. Can you find go? Where do we find our marker? 1, 2, 3. You're trying, I know. So she's still kind of learning how to tactily explore it. Yeah.
And what we see there is typical. Kids who are visually impaired, they don't develop a pointer. They have no reason to point at. So that is a skill that needs to develop through OT, as well as introducing a device. So I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit here. So you can see the tactile markers are on the side. She's able to find those rows paired with those 8 anchor words, and those are the ones where she started. So think of this Gorilla Tape that's on there as, if you're familiar with words for life, vocabulary as a tactile vocabulary builder. It allows you to start with 8 locations, and then you're going to cut out some of the other ones that you're going to introduce when you're ready to introduce them.
All right, I'm gonna make it stop. Ready? Boom! What should we do? You. Oh, should we find help? I see her pushing. Help. Help! Let me help you. So she's still learning.
So this is early spring. When we took those videos of the tactile markers, that was spring. This is late spring. The device was introduced, brought home, therapy, and parents were using it at home.
Yeah.
This is summer. This is kind of midsummer after using the device since the springtime. Ani at the park. This is her sister, who's also blind. She's verbal, also from Bulgaria.
Hey Ani, are you ready? Oh, watch out, Sal. Ready?
You stop.
Show me what you need. More? You'd like more? More what?
Play.
Oh, okay. You want to play some more?
And that blows my mind every time I see it. Having that was, if it wasn't introduced, she would be on these giant tactile markers. No path really to language and putting language together. So that is Ani. I have a few others, but for sake of time, I'm going to skip over. Let's talk about a little bit what we learned. Ani, she has about 30 words right now, which is, I mean, huge compared to 8 tactile. She's putting a few words together, but she's taken a lot longer to do that because it just takes that much longer to be able to teach tactily, modeling where that language is for someone that is visually impaired. So it may seem with this population that they are stuck and there's almost a mentality of wanting to give up because they've hit another kind of roadblock. But it's important to just kind of move on, be mindful of the physical modeling and how consistent you are with it. And just be aware when talking to TBIs and talking to other professionals that I think it kind of needs a paradigm shift because especially with kids with low vision or you're learning to use some vision, there's a difference. You don't need vision to be able to talk. So that's the important thing. These kids that are totally blind are using the system totally through motor planning without any vision. We have Asa, and then I don't want to skip over them, but I'm going to just so we could talk about. I'm happy to stay on a little longer too if people want to see some of these videos. But these are some tips and tricks. So we talked about those 8 raised locations, using the Gorilla Tape and some low-tech options as well. So Vocabulary Builder is a tool that's built into the system, and what it allows you to do is take an array of 84 and limit it to just a few locations. And allows you to start where you want to end up, but only show a few at a time. And this is a good way to maybe introduce the system without that Gorilla Tape on there at first. Some kids kind of have taken a step backwards a little bit once that tactile kind of vocabulary builder has been taken off, and not have to start over, but it's just a different experience for them. So being able to start without that on there and just learning tactily where the words are is a good idea. Something else that we've seen from a team in Canada is using the soft side of Velcro and having that present in every location that doesn't have a word. So imagine a key guard on here. Only the words that are showing are going to have access and be able to talk. And then if you hit something that has that soft Velcro side, that means that there's not a word there yet, but there will be. So that's a good option as well. Use Gorilla Tape and not duct tape, because duct tape is too sticky. Gorilla Tape comes off without any residue. There's auditory prompts or fishing. So that is beneficial for some, and it's really hit and miss on who it works well for. That's essentially touching the word and having it speak so you know where each word is. So familiar with, it's kind of like JAWS, if you're familiar with the visual impaired population. It's basically going to read out what word is there in that location, so they could find it themselves. And that works well. We're working with a gentleman in New Zealand that has really taken off with the VI vocabulary using auditory prompts on. Another way to kind of isolate would be using some painter's tape. So not taking the whole array and covering with the Gorilla Tape, just isolating that specific word that you're targeting. So you could step that down quickly. You could take that off versus the Gorilla Tape. Seen that be successful as well. You could use some shaping. So if you have some clients that have some residual vision, they're using it to some extent, you could start with a larger icon. This would be under the key guard. It would be larger for them, and they would be able to shape that down. And this would be really working more on the fine motor component, where they're getting close to that word, but not exactly in that key guard location next to it, but still having success and still hearing that auditory output. And then you're shaping that down motorically. A low-tech version would be something like Puffy Paint. You could also use this as an enhancement to your tactile markers as well on the key guard. So that's a low tech again. Great if you don't have a high-tech system. I just encourage you to get onto that as quickly as possible so you have that auditory output, because that is important. And I went through those strategies quickly. Does anyone have questions? Otherwise, I could go back and talk about our two other kind of case studies that I put on there.
I have a question, Jeremy.
Sure.
So when you're working with TVIs on teams, do you find that that shift is pretty quick once you talk about it, show it a little bit, give an example? What do you find in practice with that? I'm asking as an evaluator.
Yeah, I find TVIs actually more on board than the therapists
Okay.
and parents to some extent, because they get that part. This is kind of on the CVI kind of argument as well, is that like, I don't know why you would put so much effort into working and having a system that is just on their weakness. Like you have a device designed with eight large locations because that's what they could see. But I have this kid over here that's totally blind and saying full sentences. Like, why can't the kid with CVI do the same? And I think that's just kind of where the field is right now. There's like this argument of like, the TVIs are saying, yes, we could work on the vision separately than working on language. Like you don't need to see to talk, but it becomes so entwined because you're like, oh, these icons are so small, they're gonna fatigue easily. But if they do it motorically and learn where those locations are, that's where we're having success. But it's just getting past some of these stubborn professionals in the field, perhaps.
Thank you. That's one thing that I'm really taking away from this, is I'm going to be much more mindful of this moving forward in my evaluation process. Because we do, as evaluators, tend to defer sometimes to the team that's more familiar with the client, because building motor memory takes a while.
It does. For anyone, it's going to take a while, but I say it's worth it as far from a quality language perspective in the long run, to have a longer road up front a little bit than going quickly through it and then having poor language as the outcome in the end. We have one team and I didn't have approval to share her in this session, but we'll be talking about her in the ATIA session. She is in Canada. She's 9 years old. She has Fracture syndrome, which is when you're born with skin over your eyes and over your ears. So she could see some light, but she has no vision. She essentially has no eyes. She's essentially deafblind to some extent. She has some behind the ear hearing aids, and they struggled. They struggled and they struggled, and they came across this, and they said, "All right, this is what we're going to do." And it was a struggle. Mom says they almost gave up 3 times because just different little roadblocks along the way. She started with 2 words and is now one of the fastest AUC users I've ever seen. She is complete sentences. She is using 2 hands motorically to speak her sentences, and she has no vision. So it's amazing. And they have a lot of the realized data, realized language data as well, which is also super interesting because it looks like a lot of nonsense. There's some days that this girl, she had 8,000 hits, which is, I mean, like, I don't even speak 8,000 words sometimes in a day. And she has 8,000 hits and it looks like complete nonsense. But when you analyze it, she was going in, saying the same word 100 times in a row and developing a motor plan for that, and then taking a new word and finding it. And this is someone with intellectual disabilities as well. So it's important that the system be open, they're able to explore, and that's where, like, limiting it at first is detrimental. But obviously that it's a spectrum of where these kids lie.
Thank you.
Avery. Yeah, so let me find a picture. So let's pretend this was, I'm answering Avery's question. So what they did was they put like a piece of paper underneath. They cut out the squares for the words. Let's say it was these 8 locations. And then they put the soft Velcro dots into all the other locations. That way she could feel where there wasn't a word, but knew that that was going to be eventually a spot. And that just helped her locate where some of the other words were going to be on there. And that was a trick that the TVI put into place up there. I hadn't seen that before, but it sounds genius when you when you think about it. It's kind of the inverse of the tape. Is the tape's there just to isolate those locations, but why not show all the locations, but show where the words are not? So that does that make sense, Avery? Cool. Well, we're right at 6:15. I'm happy to stay on and show some more videos if you guys want. Otherwise, I'm happy to come back another time as well. You guys let me know.
I would just like to throw in my 2 cents that I'd love a session about cortical blindness. I know you mentioned that with CVI.
Yeah, it's that's why I said it's a different animal than what we're talking about tonight. There is an overlap. I could argue everything I talked about today. I don't know why it would not work for CVI, but apparently if you have vision, none of this works. And I understand the cortical blindness part and your brain isn't processing, but the rest of your sensory system is. So I argue, why not motor planning? And I was in a CVI session today, I Closing the Gap, and the TVI said the same thing. It's just some of the time in the field, they're kind of talking about both sides of their mouth. They're saying, you have to do this, you have to do this, but motor planning works too, but they don't line up. So it's sometimes it gets confusing, and I understand why there wasn't a vocabulary for visual impaired. Like it's an interesting, it's a very niche, it's a very niche field. But CVI is a little larger, I think, than the specifically just no vision, low vision. Does that make sense? Well, all right, the winter, spring, CVI.
Yep, I'll send you dates tomorrow.
Sounds good. Anyone else?
If anyone wants to stay for another video, will you please put it in the chat? All right, well, thank you, Jeremy.
All right, my pleasure.
Oh, East Coast, got to move along. Okay, thank you, Jeremy. We will sign you up for another one. And thank you, Sherry, as well. And thanks for everyone for attending. Sign up for more of the series, and we will be trying to put together another series, like I said, in the winter and spring as well. So contact us with any questions at the email or phone number for any assistance making a referral for a client to the NAU IHD AAC evaluation and training program. And thanks everyone for attending.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sherry.
Jeremy, you went to Closing the Gap today?
Just a session. I've kind of been to it before, but I wanted to see what else they were talking about.